Tales from Juthos, Part 3. Angie, roughly how long is this going to take? My arse has gone numb, came a voice from the crate in her arms. Shut up, Dogan, Angie whispered back. Passing beneath the crane, she made a point of accidentally knocking the crate containing her friend against the low-hanging pulley. Again, how in the hells do you expect me to pick up on anything with my ears ringing? The Seyrat D had clearly had enough. Truthfully, Angela had as well. This was a terrible plan. The woman, however, simply growled in response. She looked up at the side she had come to know as the Aetherling. The smuggler's vessel had clearly seen its fair share of trials. Her keen eyes could make out some of the telltale signs of many hasty seaborne repairs. The tonal difference in the wood and the grain was striking in places. Casting her eyes up from beneath her hood for a brief moment, she risked a glimpse at the bulwarks. Axe marks. Wait, no. There were signs of beast attacks too. And she stopped in her tracks, lowering the crate slightly. She had heard of sea attacks along the northern coast of Ensheim from one of the many merchant sailors from beyond the kingdom she had been sent to investigate. The merchant had been more than happy to welcome her aboard his ship to take a closer look. He thought they had been attacked by harpies, but something about his description seemed off. The harpies she had studied had all had a single talon towards the heel of their bird-like feet, but curiously, these had two, and something about the spacing of the markings had seemed off. It was not unusual for airborne sea creatures to use the mist or intense rain and sunlight to mask their approach. Given the speed of their attack, and the chaos it would generally cause amongst the crew, reports would vary hugely. She also distinctly remembered reading that harpies, being of low to human intelligence, would often attack the rigging and sails of a ship in an effort to slow down the speed of the vessel and possibly starve the crew out. She had only ever hunted mountain harpies who preyed on livestock and merchant caravans. Maybe it was possible that there was some new strain of sea harpy in the east, larger but less intelligent. Or perhaps it was a draconid, some sort of flying fish-like creature perhaps. She would love to have a chance to corner a crew member and ask, Wait, were those burn marks? Angie! Angie! Whispered a voice from the crate. By the bright goddess, if you're getting fixed on chipped woodwork again. Angie shook her head and brought herself back from wherever she had been to the current moment. No. Just waiting for the signal, she grunted. I told you to stay quiet. That's funny, because you were definitely panting really heavily just then, and usually that means... Can I help you down there, miss? Came an unfamiliar voice from somewhere above them. Somewhere, in this instance, probably being the deck of the ship they were supposed to be spying on. Angie froze in her tracks. Then she remembered that she wasn't supposed to freeze in her tracks at a moment like this. Then she proceeded to utterly fail at looking like she hadn't just, incredibly suspiciously, frozen in her tracks. Damn it! Angie could swear the only reason Esdras, the dockmaster, gave her tasks like this was specifically because she enjoyed watching just how bad she was at them. Looking around desperately for a hole in reality to escape to, she could see the dockmaster smiling from the foot of the gangplank. The plan had been that Esdras would keep the captain distracted while she planted Dogan near the hull of the vessel, so his keen Seyrat D ears could pick apart what the crew were saying. Now they were both looking straight at her. It's okay, pet. The captain has proven to be quite agreeable. He's even agreed to let you sniff about those markings. Isn't that right, dear captain? Angie gritted her teeth. Her face flushed. She could feel the eyes of both the smuggler's crew and Esdras' men staring at her. The enormous sea captain furrowed his brow, and in a confused tone said simply, Pet? She was always like this. Angie absolutely hated it. But this was the price she paid for being kept away from the rest of her family. From Julius. She breathed heavily. This was still better. Peering out from beneath her hood, Angie could see the pure mirth on Esdras' face. "Come on now, little heretic. Be a good girl and thank the good captain for his indulgence." Angela's jaw was the very picture of tension. Her unnaturally large irises locked onto the floor in front of her. She could feel the old pain swelling in her left arm, and despite herself, she had to wipe her sleeve across her mouth to stop her from visibly salivating. Pain, growing at the base of her nails, revealed the real danger. "You know, now I've adjusted, being in a box does have a certain charm." Angie dropped the crate containing Dogan to the ground behind her. The cloaked woman locked her eyes on the captain and sank down onto one knee. She tried to alleviate the pain in her hands by digging her fingers into her thighs. "Thank you, Captain, Doc Master, for your kindness." She didn't hear anything of what happened next. Her head was so loud. She bent her neck forward so that she could hide her face, breathing heavily. Focusing was hard, but it was also survival. A small, clawed hand reached out and touched the back of her cloak. Angela, you need to come back. We have a job to do." Dogan's voice seemed so far away, so irrelevant. She felt hungry. "Angela, come on. Remember your promise." The claw ran down the back of her spine, causing her to reflexively shiver. The feeling was overpowering. She tried to focus on it, to control her breathing. The Seirat D kept his hand on her as he walked around to look her in the eye. His coarse, bristle-like fur blowing in the sea breeze, his tail still, his large ears folded back against the side of his head. Slowly, deliberately, he reached down and held the side of her left hand. "Come on. Let go." Tears welled in the side of Angela's eyes. She didn't want to look at her hands. "Come on, Angie." She took a deep breath. Like timber pulled from a vice, her still rigid hand unlatched from her thigh. She couldn't look. "It's okay. Well done. You're fine. They are fine." Quivering, she looked down. It was just her hands. She took a deep breath. "Thanks, Dogan." The Seirat D smiled slightly. "If you ever drop me again, I'm going to drop gull shit in your drinks." "Okay." Regaining herself, Angie took stock of her surroundings again. The captain and the dockmaster were nowhere to be seen. She must have been fading out for a while. "Curses," she thought. "I must have looked ridiculous just kneeling there whilst everyone walked away." It was getting on into the evening now. She could see fires being lit across the cavern. Soon the whole port would be awash in a flickering orange glow. She wished she could find it beautiful. This had been her home ever since Esdras had found her trying to flee the country to the east. She had never been any good at sneaking, and a great many people were very interested in following her particular family's movements. When Esdras had discovered she was a Dravenfall, Angela II had been forced to plead with her not to report her whereabouts to the rest of her family. The king had to be informed, of course, but Esdras had made the argument that Angie's particular skills could be of great use on the eastern sea border. in secrecy. Word was sent and later received from Mentis's agents, confirming that the ruler saw fit to agree. Making a direct request of the king that went against his existing directives was no small risk for the dockmaster, and getting Ezradis on board with the idea in the first place had cost Angie, well, she didn't really like to think about it. Steadying herself against a mooring post, Angela drew herself back to her full height, making sure her hood was covering her head properly. Dogan watched her as she stood, his ears folding forwards into their normal bat-like positioning. There was a peculiar expression upon his face. "What is it?" asked Angie. "I think the gnomes are still on board. I can still hear them talking inside. Odd." It was odd. Each time the previous refugees had made it to the dock at Gren, they had been hurried away into carts and off to the capital as soon as possible. Indeed, she could remember carts being prepared earlier. Now they were nowhere to be seen. "Are you sure?" she asked. The Serad D just narrowed his eyes at her and tweaked his ears sardonically. Why would the smugglers be hiding gnomes from Ezradis? Surely they knew there would be repercussions. No, that couldn't be it. The dockmaster must be up to something, particularly if the captain really had invited her aboard to perform an inspection. Shaking off and flexing her left arm to try and ease some of the ache that had been building in there, she turned and looked up towards the gangplank. "Okay, let's go take a look," she said, trying to sound confident once more. "Do you, want me to stay outside in case something happens?" That was Dogan's usual job. He didn't really react well to conflict. "They already know you're here, and we're pointing cannons at them. They won't try anything." She tried to rationalize it away. There would be no real use for Dogan on the ship while she was looking at the markings. He knew that too. "Okay. Let's go talk to some smugglers then." "Sure." He didn't sound overly enthusiastic. "Thank you, Dogan." Walking side by side, they approached the gangplank leading up to the Aetherling. From on board, sat leaning his back against the bulwark, a grey-skinned arm reached out to the entrance, holding a long, lit pipe, beckoning them on board. "He's been waiting for us all this time," Dogan warned. Then it would be rude to keep him waiting any longer. Angie smiled at her companion. She began to stride up the plank. Gracefully rising to his feet and turning to meet them, the Ashkith smuggler regarded his two companions. He looked at them for a long moment, puffing on his pipe. "Well, I was going to remark that it was a pleasant rarity to host a Seyrat aboard our vessel. But then I see you're both rarities, aren't you?" The man smiled pleasantly. "I've been instructed the captain would allow me to take a look at some of the markings you have gained in your voyage." She wasn't going to let him get the better of her. She received enough of that sort of thing from Ezradis. "As long as you tell us what to make of it. The dockmaster says you're quite the expert in these matters. Does the profession run in the family?" "There is an irregularity in your heartbeat," interjected Dogan, quite suddenly. The Ashkith's eyes darted back to her companion. He looked perplexed. "What?" "If that is what he agreed, then I will be happy to share my findings with your captain. Where is he?" She had seen Dogan pull this trick before. It was one of his favourites. He's gone to visit a tavern that he likes. I'm sorry, did you say something about my heart?" Dogan performed a well-practiced, sage nod. "I'd try to calm down a bit if I were you." The Seyrat D, smiling slightly, closed his eyes and tilted his head to the side so his ears flopped slightly. It was supposed to make him seem earnest, cute, and well-intentioned, Angela had fallen for that one before. "Do you mind if I get started? I feel like we're wasting time." Angela pressed the offensive. "Oh, certainly, I suppose." The grey Ashkith was still staring with troubled eyes at Dogan. He wafted his pipe around the area to signify that the deck was hers to inspect. She left Dogan to have his fun. Messing with someone would help him keep his mind off the fact he was standing on a ship full of armed smugglers. Immediately, she pulled a notebook from her pocket and started to scratch down everything that she could find. Cursing under her breath, she moved around the rents torn by the landing of the great Skulgarum that the dockmaster flew. Catching it for her had been one of the first challenges Esodras had set for her. They were seen as great status symbols amongst the seafront nobility, and it had taken Angela a full 3 months to successfully capture it. She would have barely managed to get it under control were it not for sudden elements. Sometimes she wished she'd have taken even longer and found a more aggressive specimen. Maybe it would have eventually bitten its rider's head off. Footsteps approached from her left. Another member of the crew was climbing up from below decks. He had orc in him, that was plain to see. He had a simple worn shirt on, and kept a messy black beard with various beads in it.
"You'll be the tracker, then. What do you make of it?"
Angela acknowledged him for just a second, before continuing to look around at the various burn marks and scrapings. She could see remnants of dried blood on the decking. Digging into one of the cuts with the tip of a knife, she extracted an iron-like filament and moved beneath one of the ship's lamps to examine it. "That is for the dockmaster and the captain only. I'm sure he can answer your questions for you later. Didn't he also tell you to keep a hood on when you were above deck?" The man grunted.
"Even at night? Really?"
"It is right to shield oneself from the moon's rays. Otherwise Konya will goad you into madness and unrest," she replied. But Angela wasn't really paying attention to him. She was spacing out the distance between markings with her forefinger.
"Really?"
he asked again. But she ignored him. She heard him grumbling as he walked back down the stairs. Rubbing her temple beneath the lamplight, Angela thought back to her training at the manor. She could hear Dogan chattering away with an increasingly concerned Ashkith. 4 fingers width separation, roughly a foot's length in the talon, the metallic residue, and burns. She turned back to the pairing by the gangplank. "Ashkith, did any of your crew see the creature?" she asked, intently. "Aye, Captain Silden slew it. He was on deck at the time." She didn't really want to know the answer to the next question. "And the body?" "Nothing left. Incinerated. Turned to ash and dust as soon as the battle was done." Oh no. Did he tell the dockmaster this? Angela's mind was racing. "What's the matter, Angie?" chimed in Dogan. "Did any of you tell the dockmaster?" she repeated, ignoring her friend. The Ashkith, despite himself, backed away from her. Yes he did. She didn't believe him. That's when and why she decided to have you come aboard. Do you know something about what it was then? Right scary it was. Wings twice, no, 3 times as wide as I am tall." The man continued, but Angela was looking out over the port and along the path the prepared but empty carts would have taken to leave the western side of the city. Clearly, Esodras didn't think the story was that unlikely. "Where did you say your captain was going again? A tavern?" "Aye, Mountain Heart or something. He said he would be expecting you." She searched his eyes for a moment. He seemed to be telling the truth. "Come on, Dogan." She grabbed the Seyrat's arm and pulled him with her down the gangplank. She shouldn't be excited about this, much less smiling. But despite everything she knew, she was.